Everyone has a story about how they found their way into aviation. Some knew from childhood, others stumbled into it by chance, some get referred to it. Here on the channel, we're going to start talking to professionals from every corner of the industry. That's going to be pilots, mechanics, controllers, dispatchers, whatever I can find. We're going to learn what makes them tick and what got them into aviation and what keeps them going. So for today, let's dive into the story. All right, so now we're recording. So from now on, if you need me to edit anything, just let me know, and I don't know, mark it in my brain or something, and I'll go back and edit it.
Sounds good.
All right. Welcome back, everybody. Again, my name's Brandon. This is GSI guy, and again, we're going over our Aviation Conversation Series. This is episode 3, and this is where I sit down with professionals in aviation, whether it's from the pilot background, the dispatcher, mechanic, whatever I can get my hands on. And we talk about their journey in aviation, how they got here, why they're here, do they enjoy it, do they not enjoy it, did they wish they did something else, which I haven't ran into one person yet that has told me that. The goal of all of this is going to be to inspire, to educate, and to connect people with aviation. It's also to help people that are curious about aviation understand the inner workings of our industry because there are some things that aren't the same once you get into aviation that we'll go through and we'll talk about and that kind of thing. So let's meet today's guest. I have Chris Cerillo with me. And Chris is a
Yep.
767. He's a current 767 pilot, and we're going to talk about that. So, Chris, just to jump off and start, what got you into aviation? Why did you get into aviation?
I think I have a pretty typical story in regards to how I got in. I was actually born right after Top Gun came out, and
Hmm.
so it was like actually the first movie I ever watched with like my parents. And then of course, after that, I'd watch it a million times afterwards. But as I was growing up, when I saw like Tom Cruise in the F-14 and just like all the cool stuff that they did and just how well that movie was produced, it got me hooked from the get-go into aviation. I was like, that's the coolest thing in the world. I want to do that. And so from there I just kept saying to myself, hey, I'm gonna be a pilot. And I never ever once changed my mindset from when I was a baby till now. So that's
Geez,
what I did.
that's good. But it's funny that I just said something about how aviation is different when you get into it compared to what you see on TVs and movies. Then you'd say Top Gun's like, wow, yeah, that's a big divide. But that is one of the iconic movies that get people into aviation. That's awesome. I love Top Gun as well. Hell, it's probably one of my favorite Tom Cruise movies. Um, okay, so you see Top Gun, you're like, okay, I'm gonna be a pilot. I'm not gonna change my mind for being a pilot. How did you get started? Like, how did you do it? Did you do it strictly on the civilian side? Was there military? Was there?
Yeah, so I went through the military to do it. Initially it was a bit of a trek because I started off with not the greatest family situation in the world. And we all have that in our lives. But I had some struggles I had to get through to get to that final destination for myself. But then, as I grew up and became an adult, I went into the military. I was actually a crew chief myself. So I
Oh,
worked
nice.
maintenance. So I started off enlisted. And I was like, all right, well, you know what? If I'm going to go enlisted, I'm going to learn a skill set that's going to be kind of related to aviation. I went into the Air Force too, so that kind of helped out a lot because most jobs are.
Yep.
And then from there, I was like, okay, well, what would be the best job? And actually, the one thing that I really just wasn't that great at was maintenance. So I said, why don't I learn a new skill set that's also going to help me be a better pilot because I figure if I go into maintenance, I'm going to learn the aircraft a lot more in depth, and then it's going to be a lot more helpful too when it comes down to like, systems knowledge and stuff like that, and
Yeah. Yeah.
understanding how an aircraft works, theory, and all that kind of stuff. So, I went that route, became a crew chief. I did that for active duty for about 8 years. Um,
Nice.
and then I actually separated through the Palace Chase program, and went into a part-time reserve unit out of Davis-Monthan. And then I went to Embry-Riddle in Prescott, Arizona, and that's where I actually pursued my aviation degree and all my flight training. I started off in helicopters actually, and then I transitioned over to fixed wing.
Oh, okay. So, what were you crew chief on? I'm assuming you went to Davis Monthan, so it's probably 15s, F-15s.
So actually, when I first started in active duty, I went to Osan Air Base,
Oh,
and I was on the F-16
okay.
initially. So yeah, I was the F-16 and the F-117 were like the same like program.
Yeah.
So that's when I started. I never actually touched the 117 though, unfortunately.
Oh, that'd
But
be
I went to
cool.
the F-16 out to Osan. I had some experience with the U-2 as well out there.
Nice.
And then I transitioned over to Masawa Air Base. And I continued on the F-16 out there with the Wild Weasels. After that, I went to New Mexico, Holloman Air Force Base, and that's when I transitioned over to the RPAs, the MQ-1s, the MQ-9s,
Oh,
Predators and Reapers.
yeah. Okay.
Yeah, because they literally just got rid of the F-117s like a month before I got there, so I never got to
Dang.
actually. Yeah, I missed out on that train unfortunately, but the RPAs were cool. That was a nice transition. Got a lot of good training out of it. Uh, General Atomics actually came and taught our courses, so I actually got A&P certified through them on the aircraft, um, which was really cool experience.
That's awesome. Yeah, I
And
was going to ask if you had your A&P doing all that. So I didn't, because I know on the pilot side, when a pilot gets done, with flight training and all that kind of stuff, when they get out, they can just it's a real easy transition over to an ATP, depending on what you flew. So I didn't know if the maintenance side was the same way.
yeah, so actually the A&P, so I have the actual test certificate from the FAA to go and actually do my A&P. I don't have
Yeah.
the official FAA A&P, but
Oh,
so
okay.
General Atomics, how they do their thing is they actually have a program where like they'll give you like a little A&P certification for their aircraft. So they go
Oh,
over pretty
oh,
much all that stuff in that detail. So that you can work on those aircraft specifically, but it's not an official like FAA one. It's just like, hey, you
gotcha.
went through our course and we taught you how to do things on this plane with us.
Right.
So that's what I got through them, which was, I mean, still either way, it was really, cool experience and great
Yeah.
certificate to have if you ever wanted to go that direction. Um, but yeah, the nice thing is also obviously, being a mechanic in the military period, you take that training certificate over to the FAA. As long as you have the number of years required, which if I remember correctly, they needed at least like 3 years and at least a five skill level, you can actually get the full test permit for your A&P. And after that,
Oh,
it's just,
okay.
it's just on you to go take all the examinations.
Yeah. So basically, they just assume the military taught you enough to where you can pass the test. So here's your endorsement kind of thing, and then you just got to go take the test. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Um, and then you said you went to Embry Riddle after that and did stuff through Embry Riddle.
Oh yeah, yeah. So after my active duty out of Holloman, like I said, I Palace chased out of there. So that's an educational program where you can get out about 6 months early from your data separation.
Yeah.
I did that, and then what that allowed me to do was go to a reserve unit, which I chose Davis-Monthan at the time in Tucson, and become a part-time, traditional reservist. I would just do that, the weekend warrior basically. I
Right.
went 1 week in a month, 2 weeks out of the year to go do maintenance on the A-10 out there. And
Oh,
then
nice.
the rest of the time I would be spending at my university taking care of classes, getting through flight training and all that stuff. So yeah, I went to Embry-Riddle in Prescott, Arizona.
That's awesome. So when you're in the reserve unit like that, I did 10 years active duty and then got out. Didn't have anything to do with reserves or anything like that. I wanted to, but um, I kind of I didn't get out in the best way possible to be able to make that happen. But um, I was always curious. do they have like tuition assistance or something like that? Did they help pay for the flight stuff, or did you have to dip into your GI Bill to be able to do that, or how'd that work?
Yeah, so they do have some educational benefits. They're not the greatest in the world, but I mean it's something there. But yeah, basically like you were saying, it was like tuition assistance.
Okay.
And they would supply that, but it never really worked towards anything that I was doing. Mostly because just my school was so expensive, and I was actually at the main campus. Um, Now there was always an opportunity to do like online courses or something like that, and then I could utilize the TA through that and
Yeah.
then just transfer the credits over. And our school had a program like that. It's just I never needed to because I was already using the GI Bill. So I was like, I don't really need to dip into a secondary when or the GI Bill's already covering everything.
Yeah.
And it honestly it really didn't make any sense at that point because like it's not like it was going to prevent me from using it anyways.
Right.
So I just utilized the GI Bill to the max.
Oh,
But yes,
okay.
but they have tuition assistance, and if you never actually went active duty, there is a way to qualify for the GI Bill, but after X amount of service, and my understanding is, and don't quote me on this because I'm not 100% sure on this, but I believe it was as long as you give like X amount of years, then you can actually start using it.
Yeah.
And then if I remember correctly, there was just a few restrictions for reservists compared to active duty side, but overall it was still a really good program.
Yeah. Well, and so had I had a different recruiter, maybe I would have known a little bit more about the guard and reserve side. Maybe I wouldn't have spent, all the time in active duty. But um I when I got out, I used my GI Bill towards a degree and got my bachelor's in, business administration and whatever else because I was like, oh, I'll just there's no such thing as an in-flight refueler on the civilian side, so I'll never have to do that. Well, turns out there's a couple companies now that have bought some airplanes and now they do civilian air refueling. And I'm like, well, shit. If I would only thought ahead a little bit, but that's fine. That's fine. I enjoy what I do, so we'll just go from there. Um, so when you were going through all the training stuff and you were doing all the flying, well, mainly on the flying aspect of things. Um, well, hell, I guess for the with the maintenance stuff too, because you got quite a few years of maintenance. So, what part on the maintenance side, and then what part on the aviation, the flying side of it, did you find the most difficult to get through, or challenging? Maybe not difficult, but just more challenging than the rest of it.
So I'll start off with the maintenance side. So my first assignment actually right out of training was transient alert actually out of
Oh, geez.
Osan Air Base.
Yeah.
So, I was crash recovery transient alert. So the point of that whole thing was just because they were so full on the flight line side and also on the phase side was they were saying, okay, you're part of the maintenance squadron at the time, so the MXS, and that section was consisted of like crash recovery TA, phase dock, and all those like specialty areas like wheel and tire, all that stuff.
Yeah.
So their thought was, okay, you're going to go here for 6 months and then you're going to transition over to phase so you can actually get some time on your aircraft, and then you'll move on and do whatever at your next base. Well, that never happened. So
Oh,
they actually kept us in transient alert crash recovery for the full like 1 year that I was at Osan Air Base. And that, again, like I said, it was my first duty station straight out of training. So I really didn't get any real training on my aircraft right off the bat. Besides like when we did the refreshers going out there and just, taking care of the torque links to, attach the tow bar and all that kind of stuff. Beyond that, there wasn't much, handling of the aircraft or learning of it. So when I transitioned over to my next base at Misawa Air Base, I went straight to the flight line and, I became a senior airman who had like no experience on the
right.
aircraft. So they're like, I was a year off. So, I had to learn basically as like a brand new airman, but like a rank higher. And so that initially that was a little bit hard because, everybody's all like, dude, how are you a senior airman? You don't know anything about your
Yeah.
aircraft. I'm like, well, this is the situation. So, obviously, in maintenance, people will tend to give you a little bit of crap when you're a new guy and like you're learning things. And but I think even more so in my situation because I was already a year in, I still didn't know anything.
Yeah.
So but it was nice because it actually developed a lot of great relationships because in maintenance, if you're not getting if they're not talking crap on you, then they don't like you.
Then they don't like it.
So
Yep.
yeah. And so I got my fair share, but at the same time I learned a lot, but it was a lot more difficult because I had to play a lot of catch up. And I didn't want to be that guy who was like seen as lazy and just didn't care. And so every time I'd always be volunteering for like every job that nobody wanted to do because I hadn't done it yet. So I was like, like, hey, who wants to go to the wash rack today? Well, I haven't done a wash before, so I'm going to go out and volunteer for that. And then, who wants to do the EPU today? I'm like, I guess I'll do it, so.
Yeah, and volunteering in the military, if you've never been in the military, volunteering in the military is not really volunteering. If you volunteer, you're going to get the shittiest things, the worst end of the deal you usually get. So, and I can see where like showing up with a year or so experience, like they're like, well, you've already been in here a year. How do you not know how to do this? I could see where that would kind of give you a not I well, what's the opposite of a leg up? It would definitely be a hindrance. Okay, so what about on the flying side of things? What was the most challenging part of that?
Oh yeah, so flying, obviously I started that. I actually did a little bit of flight training when I was in high school out of Yokota Air Base actually, because I went to high school in Kanzama, Japan. Last 3 years of high school, my dad got stationed out there. He asked me like, "Hey, this is gonna be your last assignment with us. Where do you want me to put down?" And actually, Japan was my first choice, and we got it, so it was
Oh,
really
nice.
cool. So yeah, I got to go. I was basically pretty much smack dab in Tokyo at Camp Sama, Japan. And when I was in school, there was a flight training school over at Yokota Air Base. So I would go to the Aero Club there and do my ground school and all that kind of stuff. Unfortunately, I was too young at the time to actually do any of my solo stuff until like I became 16.
Yeah.
And then by the time I came 17, I wasn't able to actually get the license because I just got so involved with other programs and stuff. But I did flight training out there initially, so I wasn't completely without any knowledge of the program. But when I actually first got into it was when I went to Embry-Riddle into the helicopter program. And so obviously I went from airplanes to helicopter,
Yeah.
which was already a big, transition and honestly, in my opinion, a lot more difficult. I thought helicopter, learning, especially in the Robinsons, was far more difficult than, the airplane side. But when I first got in, I didn't realize like how much extra studying you really had to do and
Yep.
a lot of people just think you just come in and go up there and fly. Yeah, there'll be some reading and stuff like that and some studying, but like for the most part, it's just going to be all about how you learn in the aircraft. Well, there's a lot of prep work you got to do on the ground too.
Yep.
I mean, there's a lot of books you got to read, a lot of material you got to read because there's two examinations. There's the practical examination, which is the flying part, but then you also have the oral, which is testing your knowledge on stuff that you're supposed to know. And so I remember starting off that it was a little difficult to kind of try and get myself on a real curriculum because even though the school had its own curriculum, um, it was a little unorganized.
Yeah.
So you really had to kind of figure some things out on your own and put some initiative into it. And so initially that was I think the hardest part for me, which is kind of figuring out how to do all this stuff and like in which order I should do things to kind of stay on track and keep myself progressing in a good way.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, there's about a million reasons why I would agree in saying that a helicopter is more difficult than an airplane. Um, I obviously teaching guys that like come out of the army and that was all they were rotary wing, and they're just like, oh, you have fixed wing guys, blah 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 blah. It's like you couldn't pay me enough to get into a helicopter. Like you just can't. I know quite a bit about fixed wing airplanes. I know quite a bit about the 7.6, and I look at a freaking helicopter, and there's not a damn thing that makes sense to me in that thing. So, I mean, I could see where that would definitely be an interesting thing. But why? So why switch from helicopters back to fixed wing?
So honestly, that was actually always my goal. I mean, don't get me wrong, I loved flying helicopters, but I realized that at the time the market was really saturated with a lot of helicopter pilots. A
Yeah,
lot of vets were using their GI Bill to get like, rotary wing certifications and taking all the jobs. So
yeah,
and then also at the same time, I knew that lifestyle wise, fixed wing was a much better lifestyle for pilots than it was on the rotor side. So for me, the what I why I did it was, um, well, first off, I had the GI Bill, so it was covering everything,
yeah.
and so I wanted it to cover all. Well, first off, I wanted to do the more difficult training first, so that when I transitioned over to fixed wing, it would just be a breeze, and that's exactly
Makes
what
sense.
happened. I mean,
Yeah.
I got all my helicopter stuff knocked out, and then when I went to go do my fixed wing, just breezed through it. I mean, it wasn't even a challenge, in all honesty, just because of how difficult the helicopter was in comparison.
Yeah.
And then also, I was just trying to use my GI Bill to cover the most expensive stuff first. And so that's just how it worked out. So
Okay. So, how long or how much time do you have in helicopters?
I like 351 hours. Outside of my training, because I just got my commercial and I stopped there.
Oh, okay.
Um, I'm going to pursue my instructor later, but just to get everything that I needed as far as the fixed wing stuff as well. I just had to work out my benefits to where I just got what was necessary at the time.
Gotcha.
So that's why I did that. But after I got my commercial, I did have a few opportunities to do some ferrying flights, so that helped build a few extra hours and stuff like that. So
Did you do the I don't want to say it this way, but I'm gonna say it this way. The dreaded CFI way. Like did you go the CFI way for the fixed wing to get your hours, or how did you get your hours on the fixed wing side?
no, actually, I didn't. So, that was the plan actually when I went to go do the fixed wing side was actually go from like from zero all the way up to CFI and double I. But when I transitioned, the school I went to was a new aviation program. Um, I kind of got suckered into going to that program, and it was better than it was than they were making it out to be. And so ultimately, I did end up having to um, you know take some action there, which ultimately got resolved. But because of that, like a lot of the GI Bill got burned off, so I was only able to get up to my multi-commercial. So I
Okay.
got all, like I said, I got all the stuff that was required to be done.
Yeah.
But then, the last few things, they kind of just fell off because of like, action that I needed to take. So I actually went the low hour pilot route, which was I ended up actually getting an aerial survey job. I was just lucky enough to get that. I know those
Okay.
like those golden goose like low hour jobs that when people don't want to get their CFI,
Yeah.
yeah, that's I was lucky enough to get that. So I actually did aerial survey with a company called Giamni out of French Valley Airport in California.
Okay. And that aerial survey is basically just flying lines, right? Like you fly up, turn around, come back, and then like you're just flying grids. Is that
Yep,
essentially what you're doing?
that's exactly what you're doing. Yeah, it's, we had different types of aircraft, with different types of equipment. We had like, a black and white like snap camera, and then we had like the LiDAR system
Oh
for
wow.
like the multi and stuff like
Yeah.
that. So, which obviously, more people wanted to fly that, but yeah, what I actually built most of my time in was the single engine Turbo 206 that we had, and that had that old like black and white camera in there, the old system,
Yeah.
all the old equipment that didn't like work very well. So like it really had to you really had to work on your stick and rudder skills to like fly those lines perfectly and get those pictures. So
Yeah.
I mean I enjoyed it. It was a great experience. Like I said, it really helped my stick and rudder skills, and my overall ability to fly, as well as my other aviation skill sets, like working with air traffic control, all these different airspaces that we had to work in, and there's areas where I had to work like right in front of like LAX approach corridor. So
Oh geez.
there's a lot of coordination that had to be done there too, and then of course I'm always causing them problems because
Yeah. You're
they're
just
trying to
in the
sequence
way
me
flying
in.
a line.
Yeah, but it was fun. It was a great time, and that's how I built my hours was starting off an aero survey.
So that was, I'm assuming that was was that your first quote unquote paid aviation job then?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So obviously something like that, it sounds like, it goes back to the whole thing. I was told numerous times that I should go out and do my pilot training, like just take 2 weeks off, go out to Arizona, knock it out and be done because, Arizona's got beautiful weather all the time, blah, 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 blah. And in that same class that I had this guy telling me that, another guy was like, "Well, that's great and all. He'll get his stuff, but calm winds don't make a good pilot. Like you gotta have things that kind of that test what you're made of." And like you were saying, having to use the old equipment and having to make sure your stick and rudder skills were better. It sounds like that almost made you a better pilot in general doing something like that than it would be flying the lidar airplane or the newer stuff. Would you kind of agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I feel like a lot of, the newer pilots that are coming in today that are only getting like, the newest and the greatest equipment, all the glass stuff, like, just the GPS and all that.
Yep.
I think it's doing a disservice to them because they're like, I mean, let's just say that we have a complete like grid failure or something like that, and we need to go back to like the old ways of flying. Like they're going to be at a huge disadvantage because they just don't have that type of experience or the same amount of like time training and that kind of stuff like we did.
Right.
So I mean, yeah, I think it's a disservice to the aviation community to not have the training and some of that older equipment. Even if you have like the newer stuff, it still converts to some of the older,
Right.
and I just don't see a lot of the training in that older technology being done anymore just because it is phasing out.
See, that's funny. The last episode, the last one I just recorded, we had that very conversation, where it seems it seems like that there are more people that are becoming pilots that are becoming career aviators that all they've seen, like the lowest level they've seen is the airplane they're on. Like the 172s that you can fly now, where they have G1000s and then installed in them, and they're this all brand new, you know, shiny object kind of stuff, and that's all you learn on. You don't have a way to fall back on the basics when stuff fails. And I look at aviation the same way I look at cars. I think everyone, before you get your license, you should be required to drive a manual transmission. Now, that's just me, but I know they don't make a lot of manual transmissions anymore, unfortunately. But in aviation, I think it's the same kind of thing. Like you need to start in a six pack, learn how to do a six pack, learn how to fly VOR to VOR, learn how to, dial all this shit in. Then you can get to move up to the G1000, and then you can do that. I mean, granted, I don't have a lot of hours. I have 45 to 50 in a 172, but one of the 172s that we would fly had an autopilot. It was not a good one. It was just it was based off of GPS, and it would just take us to the points. It wouldn't hold altitude or anything like that, right? So I told my instructor, I was like, "Well, I know what airplane I'm taking on my cross country." And she was like, "The hell you are. Like you're not allowed to take that airplane on your cross country." She's like, "I don't care what anybody says or if it's legal or whatever." She goes, "You're going to learn on the one that doesn't have the autopilot." I'm like, "All right, well, I fine, I guess." I wanted to fly the damn autopilot so bad. But I agree with you. I think it does a disservice. I think it only puts more truth to the old video of the Children of the Magenta. The
Absolutely.
automation, the
Yep.
automation is definitely taken over, and pilots need to understand that you're a pilot first and a system monitor second. So, the whole click, 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 that they talk about in that, getting rid of the automation and going back to basics and flying like you should be flying. Um, yeah, I definitely see that as an issue. Now, you may have said it and I may have just missed it, but like when did you start? like what time frame are we looking at when you started at Embry-Riddle, like getting out and you did the Palace Chase thing? Like what year are we in when you're doing that?
Okay, yeah. So I got out of active duty March of 2014. And
Okay.
then, so I actually started at Riddle May of 2014, and that's when I started doing all my flight training. I started flight training from the first semester. Um, they had a really good program. We were flying with a company called Universal Helicopters at the time. I know it's changed since then, um, but that was the program that was at Embry-Riddle. And the only reason I was actually able to do that program through the GI Bill is because they were through a public school. I guess in the state of Arizona, and I guess in some other states too, the GI Bill can't be used for flight training at a private institution.
Oh,
Which in this case, like, Embry-Riddle, we weren't allowed to use our GI Bill for the fixed wing program because it was through their institution, which was a private institution. So they had a helicopter program that was through a through a public
third
school, and they had
party
a
kind of
guest
thing.
program. So that's how that whole situation worked. And so yeah, from the get-go, I got to fly because they had a very good program, actually. I thought for the most part fairly organized, and they got people in and out. Like, I mean, they were no joke. They were getting people up in the air as much as possible. I
Yeah.
mean, for the most part, if I wanted to, I could fly like 5 days a week.
Wow.
And there were times where I did. And then at the very minimum, they had us up for at least 3 days a week at minimum. So they were heavy hitters, and they got us out and training hard. But that started in 2014,
Okay.
the summer of 2014.
So
Um,
starting in 2014, when did you get your first aviation job, the survey job? Like how long did it take you to get all your ratings?
yeah, so from there, I was at Riddle for about a year and a half, and then I finished my degree program. Another nice thing about the military, helped me finish school a lot faster. Then after that, was it 2000? Let's see here. So yeah, end of 2015, I went over to, and
Okay.
so anyways, I went to a school in California, and I did the fixed wing program there in end of 2015, and finished everything by the end of 2016. And then I had a year gap up until like 2000, beginning of 2018, before I got that survey job, because it
Okay.
was a little hard. Like I said, I was dealing with some issues with that school, and
Yeah.
so like in that process, I didn't have my CFI,
Yeah.
so I was looking to you know just get a low hour pilot job. Took a little networking, but after a year, I got that job, and then I started in beginning of 2018. So roughly about a year after my training, and the training took about combined with the fixed and the rotor, what 3 years?
About
So
3 years.
yeah.
Okay. So we're talking 3 years from basically start to getting to your first aviation job or your first flying job. And then how long did it take you? Like, was that the only thing you did prior to getting your ATP, or was there other stuff in between there?
Yeah, so I mean, after the aerial survey, I didn't have to do that for very long. I was building a ton of hours, like almost like 200 hours a month. It was crazy,
Oh, wow.
the amount of flying that was available. Um, but as soon as I finished that and got my hours, I did have a couple of regional airline offers, and one class date actually set up for January of 2020. And once I sorry, once I got that offer, I saw another job opportunity open up for the FedEx Caravan position out of California, and on a whim, I just applied to it to see what would happen, because that was kind of a job I always wanted to try out.
Yeah.
Always wanted to fly the Caravan, and then on two, I just kind of wanted to do that cargo operation. So I just went on a whim. I did it, and like literally 4 hours later, I got a call from the guy saying like, "Hey, we just lost all these guys to, like, the airlines. You want to come over and fly for us?" And I was like, "Well, yeah, I'd love to come and like interview with you guys and
I
talk
just
about it."
applied. So yes, please.
Yeah, yeah. So it's funny because this was like December of 2019. So like, COVID was like just like starting to become like a thing, like,
Yeah,
over in China, but it wasn't like a big thing yet. Like nobody was freaking out yet. Besides the toilet paper stuff.
right.
Um, but then, yeah, he's like, hey, I was actually working at an air traffic control center, at the time, over in Atlanta. And so when he asked me to come over, I was like, yeah, can I come over in like 2 weeks? He's like, yeah, absolutely. So he's all like, does Christmas Eve work for you? I'm like, sure.
Oh, jeez.
So, like, I was a little shocked when he asked me that, but I was like, all right, sure, yeah, absolutely. So I went over there. He brought me into this little simulator, like down in Southern California. We talked initially. I did like a little written exam. And then he put me in the sim and started flying me around. And he's like, all right, man, you're great, man. You got like, actual six pack experience, you still know how to also fly digital. Um, um, you're great, man. So, uh, correct me if I'm wrong, but you said you have a regional position, right? I'm all like, well, yeah. He's all like, are you really sure you want this job? Like, everybody's leaving our job for that.
Yeah.
And I was all like, well, yeah. I told him like, I've always wanted to fly this aircraft. I've always wanted to fly this operation. Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm ultimately wanting to move on to like the jets and stuff like that later. But so I'm not looking to be here long term. But I'll give you any kind of commitment that you're looking for right now, and do this for a few years at least.
Yeah.
Um, and so, he was initially he was kind of struggling with it. So, we talked, and then eventually, what I did was actually just called the regional company and just said like, hey, thank you so much for the opportunity. Something else came up that it's going to be a little bit better for me and my situation, and so I just basically terminated the position and the class date, and that made him feel a
Wow.
lot more better. And then I took the position, and it's so funny because as soon as I took it all my friends that were at, like the regionals were like, dude, you just like gave up all the seniority, blah 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 blah
Right.
blah.
Yeah, I was just thinking, I was like, I don't know many people that would do that.
Yeah, but then ultimately the funny thing that happened was COVID actually hit, and I started in like January of 2020. That was around the same time I was going to be starting my regional class date. Well, people that were in that regional class all got sent home without going to do their
Oh,
ATP or their type rating. They never got to
yeah.
finish because they sent them home. They said, hey, like with COVID, everything's unknown now. So go home, and also you're not getting paid because you're not an employee, all that
Right.
kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, and then they never even got through training and all that stuff. So I was like, man, it's crazy how it all worked out because then I was the guy who had the job and I was building all this time because
Yeah.
cargo was working overtime. So.
Yeah. Cargo
Um,
went nuts during COVID.
yeah. So I mean, mind you, I had no idea this was going to play out that way, but like I
Yeah.
just said like, hey, I wanted to try this opportunity, and ultimately it did work out in my favor because then I was able to build all these hours, and by the time hiring started up again, I was like well in my 2,000 hours and stuff like that, and more than qualified at the time
Yeah.
to
Made it much easier to transition over. Yeah.
exactly.
So, um, so you're doing the feeder thing, you're doing so that's cargo operations. Is that part 135 or is that 121? I can't remember.
That's so for us it was 135 in the Caravan.
Okay.
There are sister companies like Empire and Mountain Air that have the ATRs that do
They do
that will actually
121
do the
stuff.
121 side
Yeah.
of it.
So
But
how long did you end up giving them at the caravan, like with the caravans? How long did you stay there before you moved on?
so the company I was with was actually called West Air. Very good company out of California. They operate pretty much all of California and then like a couple legs out of Vegas. Um,
Okay.
But overall, I mean, a fantastic company. They were really great. Great DO, great chief pilot, great operation. And basically, when you join, they don't even actually have you sign a contract. It's more of a gentleman's agreement, a handshake, saying like, "Hey, can you at least give us a year if you come?" Um, just because initial flight safety, we got to pay for all that stuff, and
Yeah.
so it works out for them. They say it's basically just a gentleman's agreement, 1 year. But I gave him over that. I gave him about a year and a half, almost closer to 2 years actually, before I actually left. And you know,
Okay. And then so you leave there, you finally move into jets at that point?
yeah. So it's funny because I initially um, Yeah, I ended up going to the regionals from there, and I went to Republic.
Okay.
So yeah, went through their program on the E-Jet, the 170
E
175s.
Yeah, ERJ 175.
Yeah. So we went through that program. Another good training program for a regional. I mean, in my opinion, probably one of the better regional programs out there,
Yeah,
if
I've heard
you're
that.
asking me. Yeah. I thought it was a very good, well organized program, pretty fair program, good instructors, all that kind of stuff. I think overall very good in my opinion.
Yeah.
I just wish they had better locations is all, but
Yeah, regionals kind of, you kind of get what you get when it comes to those.
yeah. But yeah, I went over there and this was like right in the during the hiring boom. So I was really lucky that as soon as I got through training, like as soon as I got my ATP, I was like every other pilot. Get your applications out. And so by the time like I got through like my second week and just finished IOE, I was already getting calls from all these companies to interview. Like, Alaska, Spirit, Frontier, FlexJet, NetJets. They were all hitting me up.
Yeah.
And so ultimately I took a position that was offered from FlexJet and I ended up going there. So,
Yeah.
yeah, and for me, I thought that was going to be my final destination place. I went there, and personally, it wasn't the right fit for me.
Yeah.
So I ultimately left. Nothing, no bashing of the company. They're a good company. They have a lot of great people there, and overall, it is a good company. But I kind of realized.
What were you flying? What were you flying with FlexJet?
I went to the Phenom 300.
Okay.
That's the aircraft I got to start off in. They have like three starters: the Phenom, the Challenger, and the Praetor. And when you get there, it's just a random selection. Nobody knows what they're getting. Like they'll give you a card and say, "Hey, this is the aircraft that you were assigned to." So
Yeah.
yeah, I got on the Phenom. Not a surprise. That's kind of like one of their workhorses there. And so most new people usually get that one, um,
Was
but
it
still, no.
it's the original 300, right? Not the E model.
Yeah, at the time it was the original 300. I believe they do have the E's now, but yeah, I had the original 300 at the
Okay.
time. So
And
yeah.
then
Uh,
how long did you spend with FlexJet before moving on to did you go wide body after that, right?
Also, yeah, basically, I was only there for like 6 months before I realized it just wasn't the right fit. Um, and so what I actually did was I was in the middle of the green card process with my wife, so
Oh,
I couldn't actually be out of work for long. So
yeah,
when I left, I didn't really necessarily like have like a backup plan right off the bat. I just knew that everybody was hiring, but there was going to be a little bit of a wait. So
sure.
what I did was I actually went back to my old caravan job and my old company. They took me back. They took me back with open arms, brought me back on as an assistant chief, and then I did became a line check airman there and stuff like that. So they gave me some new positions to do in the meantime, knowing that I was going to ultimately, leave again at some
Yeah,
point.
knowing it wasn't going to be a full time like or not full time, but like career end kind of thing.
Yeah, but they were very nice and brought me back on. They liked me before, and they said, "Hey, just do what you need to do." And I mean, they would have loved for me to stay and stuff like that. But
Yeah,
ultimately, they gave me some opportunities to just kind of help progress my and enriching my resume. And then ultimately, after that, here I am at ATI on the heavies, or on the wide bodies.
nice. So flying 7.6s now, flying cargo 121. Do you do any of the 7.5 stuff? Do you do any of that, or are you primarily the 7.6 side?
Yeah, no, I haven't had an opportunity to touch the 7.5 other than the simulator.
Yeah.
So, yeah, the old simulator that's still running out there. Yeah, in fact, actually, I just got back from Loft a couple months ago, so yeah, I got to go back out there. But no, I have not done the 7.5 yet. I know they are doing some more operations with that now, so there might be some more opportunities to hop into that. But I did get to do some of the international 7.6 freighter operations.
Oh, cool.
So I did get to
So
luck out in that, even though I'm a low seniority. I
yeah.
was lucky enough to get that.
So I'm assuming then you're ETOPS qualified, like did you go North Atlantic side or did you go the Pacific side for the international?
Pacific side, yeah, I
Pacific
did
side.
all the way to Sing like was it Anchorage, Yokota, Singapore, Kuala Lumpur, and then all the way back.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
So um that's a hell of a run. It's I mean it's good international experience for sure. The we always made the joke that going out to the Pacific was ETOPS light though. Like it's not near as difficult to go out to the Pacific Ocean as what it is the Atlantic Ocean, especially
yeah.
in the North Atlantic. Um and at some point maybe I'll do a video about that. I don't know. I will see. I'm actually helping a company now work on their ETOPS program. It is a beast. Like if you don't have an
Yeah.
ETOPS program and you're trying to start an ETOPS program, or for anybody who's looking to fly in an ETOPS program, it can be a lot. It's a lot of work, especially before you get the certification. On the pilot side, if you're just one of the guys that gets to go out there and get trained, that's one thing. That's enough work on itself. But on the other side, the whole getting certified is it's a lot more massive program than I thought it was.
Mhm.
I thought, yeah, sure. I taught it at ATI. I taught, ETOPS, long range nav. I'll be good. And then I get into it, I'm like, wow, okay, let me put together some stuff. But it's been a hell of a learning experience. But that's awesome. I'm glad you've gotten to do something outside the States. That's awesome.
Oh yeah.
Um, so going from Caravan, Phenom, 7.6, helicopters. We're going to leave helicopters out of it because they're their own thing. Out of the fixed wing aircraft that you've flown, what which one has been the most difficult? You think maybe? And again, I use the word difficult, but like challenging. That maybe somebody who wasn't in aviation, because like if somebody's not in aviation, they're going to look at a 7.6. Holy shit, that's a big airplane. That one had to be harder than flying the Phenom, but it's not always that way. So, like, which airplane was the most challenging for you?
That's interesting. Each one of them had their own their own difficulties. So starting off in the Caravan, overall the aircraft was pretty simplistic, but I was also flying single pilot operations.
Oh,
So there was no room for mistake and I didn't have anybody there to,
nobody
to
to
catch
rely
any of
on.
my
Yeah,
mistakes if something happened. And we flew down to minimums too. Like we were flying like to the bare minimums in thick fog and all that kind of stuff. So um that was an experience in itself, and also it was one of the first times I ever got to fly an aircraft where you know it actually had anti-icing capabilities.
oh,
So yeah, any aircraft that we flew before, obviously, which was like just all the GA aircraft, like 172s and stuff like that. They
yeah,
didn't have that stuff. They're all like, do not fly in
yeah.
icing.
You stay the hell
So
away from ice. Yeah,
yeah, exactly. But in the Caravan, for this job, well, first off, we're doing a job for FedEx, and we're getting all this freight out, so they want it out there. But since the aircraft has the capability, they're like, yeah, you're gonna go fly in icing. Now, obviously, you have your limitations, of course, but the first time I ever flew in icing, I was like, oh crap, there's there's ice on
I
the
need,
wing, there's
I
ice
need
on
to
the
get
wing,
out of here.
but I just did what I was trained and you got through it and stuff like that. But that was initial bit of a challenge, because first off, like I said, just doing single pilot ops to begin with. Um, I don't think the single pilot side of it was too difficult coming right out of training, just because when you had to go do like all your your cross country stuff by yourself and all that, that kind of built up your confidence initially, and then that kind of was pretty fresh,
Yeah,
coming straight out and stuff like that. So aerial survey and all that stuff. I was the only pilot flying and all that too as well. So I I was I was well versed in the workload management side of it.
right.
But then when it came to like the new experiences like flying in icing or flying around thunderstorms and all this like real world stuff you hit a mountain wave or something like that, or whatever, and like you get like some severe turbulence or whatever, like the real stuff, like when it actually hits you and then you're by yourself, it really kind of, perks your eyes up and, puckers you a little bit, and
Yeah.
it humbles you too at times. But
Probably wakes you up more
initially,
than any cup of coffee could.
yeah, exactly. And then of course, the Caravan also was a turboprop too. I think a lot of people discredit the experience that you get from turboprops, but I think there's a lot of experience to be had there because I think they're harder to operate than the jets, in my opinion. There's just a little bit more to do.
Yeah.
Um, So, on that side, as far as, the Caravan goes, I think that's what the challenges were there. Um, you know, in comparison on the jet side, when you look at like, when I started off with the E-Jet at Republic compared to the Phenom over at FlexJet, the E-Jet was hard because it was my first jet, and
Yeah.
also it was my first time in 121. So like I'm in a 121 training program, the death by fire hose basically.
Yeah.
Like, you're getting so much information and like you have no idea which one to like prioritize first, or like it's so much information, and if you don't have a mentor or somebody who's there to kind of like guide you and say like, "Hey, I've been through this, focus on this first, do this later." Like they're not gonna like be as hard about this as they are about this. And
Yep.
I had some struggles, just like anybody else. I was lucky to have a very good class though. We all worked really well together. I'll probably say one of the best classes I've ever worked with in training. And so we all got through it together and stuff like that. But man, I tell you that alone right off the bat was pretty hard. And I was surprised that like, first going into a jet in a sim, it wasn't as hard to like operate and control as I thought going in.
Yeah.
Obviously the biggest things is, you're going faster, so you got to learn the fact that you're going to have to slow down like on a scheduled regimen and stuff like that. And there
Your
are going to be
time
certain things
management
that
changes a little bit.
exactly. And then
Yeah.
also knowing, what you can utilize and what you can't, like when can you use slats, when can you use flaps, when can you use your gear, all that kind of stuff. Like you may have a flow that says like do this in this order, but like, if you're getting like vectors like in early or whatever, you're gonna have to kind of go outside that flow a little bit to do certain things earlier. Like you might bring down that gear a little bit sooner than when you were at like flaps 5 or flaps 15 or whatever, or something like that. Or like whichever like aircraft you're flying and whatever the flap setting is. But like, yeah, you might have to do some things a little bit out of order, but still follow your flow and stuff like that. And that was a little bit of a thing too, because you're like, oh well, hold on, if I go outside like the flow, are they gonna like pull up the tapes and say like, hey, like you didn't follow the flow, and then something bad happens, and you're like,
Right.
whoa, you didn't follow your flow, so whatever. But no, it's not like that. It's they understand obviously the things that happen in real world are going to be a little bit different. So
Yeah.
that
Well,
you
and
know.
I'm glad you say that because one of the things I apparently need to get a more comfortable chair because I've been noticing I've been adjusting myself a lot more here. Um, but one thing I try and get through to guys when I'm teaching a class is QRH, for example. Like you don't have to. I'm gonna say this gently. You don't have to follow the QRH verbatim if it doesn't make sense. And I say that given that in the front of the QRH, it usually has a statement in there that this is not. I can't remember the wording of it. I used to know it verbatim because I would quote it all the time. It basically says this is not a replacement for common sense.
Right.
And if, for example, in the 7.6, we've got runaway stab trim or unscheduled stab trim because why would we call it runaway? Because anyway, that's a whole nother discussion. But the QRH, there's no memory items to it. There's nothing. You pop open the book, you run through the QRH. But if you know the system, you know that you can go down and you can disconnect your
The
stab trim
cutoffs,
switches.
yeah.
You can hit the cutoffs on the stab trim switches, and that may actually save you. Shit, I'm not used to having that there. That'll actually save you because you know, if the airplane starts to run away nose down, it starts to get real heavy. And,
Yeah.
you know, if you're not able to hold it up, then you got problems. So I always try and say, you know, yes, know your flows, know your call outs, know the checklist, know all that kind of stuff. But realize that, you know, the captain has that emergency deviation authority. And it's you granted, you're supposed to have a an emergency for that to really take over and for you to start doing other stuff. But common sense has to win at some point. Like you have to put common sense into what you're doing, or else it won't make any difference. Um, Another great example of that, there's a checklist in which one is it? I think it's dual engine failure. Every dual engine failure checklist, I've seen three or four of them now from 7.6s. If you read the dual engine failure checklist verbatim, you get to the part where it talks about taking the engine to cut off and then run. If it hits the standby engine indicator placard limit, then you do the same thing, cut off and then repeat as necessary. Basically, is what it says. At no point does any of the checklist tell you to move on. Like, don't wait for an engine. Don't wait for if you get one engine started, you're good. Like nowhere in the checklist does it say that. And I could honestly see at some point somebody trying to restart an engine, just restart, 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 and focusing on that until the airplane goes in the ground. And it's like that's not that's not what it was. That wasn't the intention. The intention was for you to try it a few times and then go, well, shit, I got to move on because that's the rest of the checklist. But unfortunately, not every. If common sense was common, everyone would have it.
Yeah,
Unfortunately, and I'm glad you bring that up. One thing I did want to ask though about the ERJ, how is it flying a weird like
that
you
yoke.
know is there a name for that yoke like for it to like the motorcycle looking yoke?
Oh, I'm sure it has a name. I never heard what the name was,
Yeah,
but like, yeah, I mean, I'm sure it has some type of name to it, whatever. But yeah, that was a little weird getting used to at first. I mean, I've flown a cyclic on the T cyclic on the Robinson before,
yeah,
then I've gone back to like the normal like control yoke on
yeah.
the
Normal like U yoke kind of thing.
yeah, to like the Cessnas, even the Caravan, all that stuff. And then I come to this thing, and I'm like, "What the heck is this?" It was a little weird getting used to at first, but I mean, it wasn't that bad though. I wouldn't call it that bad.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
it definitely kind of throws you off at first. The first
Yeah.
time you're flying.
Yeah. All of a sudden you gotta grip it like a freaking motorcycle. Like because I'm one of those guys because I love pretty much anything that has to do with airplanes. And whenever I fly out of Pittsburgh to go to Miami or to well, that's the only place I go anymore. It seems like is down in Miami. But um every once in a while they'll throw me on an ERJ and they'll bounce me around to either Chicago or Dulles or something like that. And when I walk onto an airplane, first thing I do is I look in the cockpit to see just because I like looking and seeing how nice it is or what screens they have up or something like that. And every time I've looked into an ERJ, I'm just like, that is just so damn weird. Like it makes no sense to me whatsoever. Because 7.3s, 7.6s, the KC-135 that I was on, all the Boeing aircraft all have that same style of yoke. And I just thought, well, that's just odd placement. It's kind of like Airbus, like Airbus having that weird side stick thing. It doesn't make any sense to me. And people tell me, "Oh, it's not that bad. It's really easy. They really like it. They like having the room." But it's like it it's off to this. It's just weird. What if I'm not
Yeah.
left-handed? Like, what if I'm not left-handed? Then this is just it doesn't work. So
Yeah. I haven't flown those side sticks yet. Not even in the GA world, which I know like well, I think
it's
those Cirrus aircraft
serious,
like
yeah.
yeah, they have. I've never gotten to fly any of those, but yeah, maybe at some point in my career I might end up moving over to one of those. I mean, I know Amazon is looking to move over to Airbus and
Huh.
stuff like that, and
Yeah.
so ATI
Yeah.
might get them, and I might be able to fly them one day, but I can't imagine doing it. It just seems so weird to
Yeah,
me.
it just seems odd to me. It just seems absolutely odd to me. But
Yeah.
I, uh, to each their own. If you're focused, I guess, more on eating your lunch and being comfortable eating your lunch, an Airbus probably be perfect. Um, but I mean that's that. I grew up Boeing stuff, so that's just what it is. So, you're currently FO right at ATI.
Yes.
Um, so what does a typical day for you look like when you're on your bed, you're going out to fly? What's a typical day look like?
Yeah, it's a typical day. We'll go out to the aircraft, whether it be day or night. We're still in that phase of scheduling where we have a lot of those day and night transitions. So,
Oof.
you're coming to cargo, be prepared for some of that because,
Yeah.
again, that is the unfortunately the life with us. Um, but outside of that though, we'll go out to the aircraft. We'll take a shuttle from the hotel, get out to the FedEx facility. Sorry, not the FedEx, but the Amazon facility. You got to go through the whole security check and everything like that to get out, and then they'll van you out to your aircraft. No walking, unless it's like right in front of you. Depending on the facility, some of them will drive you even if it's like a 2 second walk right in front of you.
Yeah.
But yeah, you'll get transported to your aircraft. You start off with doing the pre-flight. Very rarely will you ever have a captain that will say, "Hey, you know what? How about you go up and I'll do the pre-flight today." I've had that once, and I was surprised on that too. But generally, as the FO, you're going to do that, so just drop the bags at the bottom of the stairs and off I go on my pre-flight, go check out the aircraft, make sure it's all good to go. There's nothing that was missed. No obvious damages that we see out there. After the pre-flight's done, I'll grab my bags, I'll hop on up. Then usually the captain will do like the cockpit check, but I always just do it anyways just to make sure. If they don't
Yeah.
say anything, then I know they didn't do it. They're relying on me, and if they say, "Hey, like I did that already," okay, cool. Then I make my way over to the seat. But yep, I'll make sure I do my inspection up in the cockpit, and then I get down into my seat, get myself situated, and I start my process. I go through my flows, my pre-flight flows, and make sure that everything is on or in the right position. And then we start doing all the loading on the aircraft, FMS, getting the flight plan loaded, getting all the performance data in there as much as you can, at least at the beginning,
Yeah.
and then once all that's done, we generally have quite a bit of time, on the cargo side, compared to the passenger. When you at least start off, you at least have about an hour, and that's if there's no delays. So you're probably done with all that stuff, and if you're even just like fairly sufficient at it, you should be done in about like roughly 20-25 minutes. Um, and then you've got like another like, you know, 35 minutes at least,
Yeah.
just sitting there. So that's plenty of time to kind of just get your wits about you, double check things in your flight plan if you didn't before. You're making sure you looked at all the MELs, understand what's available on the aircraft and what's not. Check your weather again if you haven't done that. NOTAMs, all that kind of stuff. And then, of course, as a pilot, usually when you get your clearance, you do it about 30 minutes before. So you're getting kind of close to that period. You'll get your clearance, and then after that, you sit there and talk with the captain and go through all the other checklist processes. Verifying your route after you got the clearance, make sure everything's matching. Make sure all the data that you put in was correct. Um, After that, there's a decent little wait until the loaders are finished. So it's pretty mellow. You get to sit there, sip your coffee. You can even probably grab a quick bite to eat or something like that. There's usually time. There's enough time. You're never really fully rushed.
Yeah.
Um, and even more so when you're actually in a through flight compared to the beginning, because then you at least have probably at least 2 hours at that
Oh,
point.
geez. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's something I think people uh, you don't see it as a passenger. The quick turns and that kind of stuff. You just get annoyed that the pilot's not at the airplane yet, and you don't realize that they're down at the end of the terminal, running up to the friggin' gate that you're at. Yeah, and then cargo. Obviously, you've got the download, you've got the upload, you've got all this other stuff that goes on. It gives you a little bit extra time. So, if you're looking for jobs, I would suggest going to cargo. But that's just me. That's just me.
Well,
Um,
I'm there with you, man.
Yeah.
I 100% agree. I definitely think that the lifestyle, is a lot more relaxed. So like, I mean, if you're looking for that type of lifestyle, cargo is definitely it. I mean, yeah, obviously, I think any job has its downsides. Of
Sure.
course, like you said, the unfortunate side of ours is that we can't get some of the crappier schedules as far as like, the day and night flying and the constant swaps.
Yeah.
It does kind of mess with your clock a little bit. But if you look past that, though, there's a lot of other upsides to it. Again, like you're never going to be rushed in between flights. Not once I've ever been rushed between flights. You
I'll go
got
ahead and knock on
time.
wood for you. It's
Yeah, right.
hopefully I didn't jinx it.
Yeah,
And I mean that's the other thing too is like, you know, you don't have to deal with passengers. You don't have to deal with the constraints of, all that kind of stuff, getting them off, getting them on and whatever else. And I would agree with you that probably the worst part about cargo is the backside of the clock flying. It's the because well, I mean, I guess it depends because it seems
yeah.
like Amazon kind of changed the schedule a little bit. Like Amazon kind of does it different than anybody else, from what I can tell, with all the companies they work for now, or they have working for them. You could fly daytime, you could fly nighttime, you could fly daytime and nighttime. Like it just kind of
Yep.
depends on the schedule. But FedEx, UPS, like these other carriers, and if anybody flies for them and you want to correct me, please tell me. But most of their schedules seem to be on the backside of the clock, where you're doing a lot more night flying than you are ever seeing the light of day. Which some people absolutely love. Fine. Other people, you need a little bit of daylight every once in a while. But again, it just depends on who you are. But I would say that's probably the biggest drawback to cargo is the nighttime stuff, or the amount of nighttime stuff.
Yeah. No, I'd say the one plus to flying night for me at least is that at least you're dealing with a lot less traffic. So like when you get
Well, that's
into the
true.
airports, the nice thing is it's pretty dead. So like you're
Yeah.
not sitting there trying to fight to get on the radios. You're not like, ATC isn't talking at the speed of light because they don't need to.
Yeah.
So,
That's true.
in that regards, it's pretty darn nice. But,
Yeah.
when you look at the clock side of it, though, it does tend to wear on you a little bit. But just something to be obviously cognizant of if you're ever going into the cargo side of the house.
Yeah. Okay, so you're at the airplane, everything's loaded, and then you take off. Are you primarily doing one leg, two legs, four legs? Like I know regionals can get kind of crazy on their schedules, and I know cargo every once in a while, depending on the route, can get kind of wonky. But what's the average, you think?
I would say the average is just probably about two legs a day, and I mean that's generally if you're doing like kind of the shorter hops, like the maybe the 2 or 2.5 hour legs, whatever.
Okay.
I mean, if you're doing like the transcontinental, then most likely you're probably going to only fly that one leg that day,
Oh, sure.
and unless they have like one maybe smaller route where it's like an hour after that or something like that, they might tack that on. But generally, if you're doing a transcontinental, you're doing the one leg. Very rarely would you ever do a two on that day, and if you do, it's very short route.
Yeah.
But most of the time, you'll get like these 2 leg days where it's like about somewhere between like an hour and a half to 2.5 hours each leg.
Okay. Well, and that's the other thing too, is like if you're watching and you decide you want to get into aviation, the bigger the airplane, usually the longer the legs, because that's what the airplanes were built for. The 7.6 wasn't built to do 6 legs a day. It wasn't built to do a half hour to 45 minute to an hour legs. It was built to go transcontinental. It was built to go international. So if you get on these types of airplanes, yeah, you might only fly one leg a day, but that one leg might be 6 or 8 hours. Like that's the other part of it. It's because you're capable of doing it. But at the same time, you get to build hours, which is cool. So of course, I guess at some point after you get your ATP and you get your ratings and all that kind of stuff, hours don't matter quite as much. Other than maybe I guess your captain upgrade stuff. But I mean, outside of that, like once you get to that point, it's kind of like, man, don't need to really count as much as I used to. Um, so what do you enjoy the most about what you do currently? Like, what do you enjoy the most about flying on the 7.6?
Well, I gotta tell you, man, it's definitely the best aircraft I've flown so far, for sure. I mean, I absolutely love the 7.6. Very comfortable ride. I love the handling of the aircraft. Um, we're also lucky that we got a little bit, slightly more modernized aircraft now. It makes it a lot nicer and easier to use compared to what it was before and stuff like that. So
Yeah,
that's a huge perk. Um, but I think the biggest thing I love about this job is just that it's such a much more relaxed atmosphere compared to what I've other flying that I've done before. Where again, like I said, it's constantly like the rush, rush, rush. Get you out like run to this place, run to that place. You need to get this done in like a couple minutes, and like you haven't even reviewed everything. Sometimes I kind of even wonder like how did the passengers like airlines actually do it because I'm pretty sure there's been times where like when we had like a 30-minute turn or something like that, or a 45-minute turn, I don't think that captain truly saw all the NOTAMs for the next place that we're going to. They're just
yeah, probably
relying on what
not.
was what was known before. I'm like, yeah, like you should probably look at this stuff.
Well,
Um,
I mean, one thing I will give the majors is they have, yeah, they're primarily flag operations, so they have actual, and I say actual. I know flight followers 99% of the time are required to have a dispatching license. They just don't
yes.
carry the responsibility of a dispatcher. The DO still handles the responsibility of being in control. But that's one thing that the majors have is they have an actual dispatcher where their license is on the line when they're saying you're good to go with these NOTAMs and you're good to go with that kind of stuff. So maybe I don't know. If you fly for a major, please let me know. But it's one of those things where it's like I think maybe there's a lot of trust put in there because of it being a dispatcher versus a flight follower.
Oh,
Not saying the dispatchers know more than flight followers because they're to me they're the same position. They're just called something different because they're under different regulations. But you know, the responsibility still is going to fall on that dispatcher a little bit more in those flag operations. So maybe that's why.
yeah. Oh no, 100%. You're absolutely right about that. But yeah, I mean, but again, like either way, the like I said, the passenger side, corporate side, there is a lot of like rush and get like things done because like they're dealing with actual passengers, so they're dealing with the people side of
Sure.
everything, and
Yep.
so on that side, you have more likely to deal with people with complaints and stuff like that. On the cargo side, yeah, like obviously you want things delivered on time, but at the same time you don't have people in the back complaining. It's just the logistics side of it where people are just, saying, hey, like we need to get this there and, this needs to be done at this time or whatever. But, when things happen and things go wrong, you don't have like a million passengers in the back like yelling at you, going like, what the heck's going on? So that,
Right.
so it's not kind
Boxes
of,
don't seem to care so
yeah,
much.
it's not adding that extra layer of stress to make the operations go faster like they need to.
Yeah.
So I mean, again, like I said, cargo side, the fact that it's so much more relaxed is what I really enjoy the most about it. Just because like I can actually enjoy what I do. I
Yeah.
can I can take my time, be methodical about everything, and then at the same time, like I said, just relax and enjoy knowing that nobody's gonna be yelling at me from the back. So.
Yep. I could totally get, and the thing is I am one of those pastures where I will sit I'll sit in the like the waiting area before at the gate and I'll hear him say something and I'll be like, "Ah, shit, we're gonna be delayed." Like I can, knowing what I know in the aviation space, I'm just kind of like, okay, so that's gonna delay us. Boy, I hope our crew is fresh. Because if they're not fresh and they're coming from like a four-leg thing, now all of a sudden we get delayed. Now they're going to run out of time. Now they got to call. And like my mind kind of spirals out from there. And luckily, I've learned, to keep my mouth shut and not say anything. Because I used to ask people at the gate, "Hey, are we going to be delayed? Are we this? Are we that?" And they would look at me like I was crazy because I was just some dude that probably Googled something and was asking a question. I was like, "No, I know a little bit about this shit. Can you tell me?" So I could only imagine dealing with 150 of me would not be fun. So I don't understand why people want to fly passengers. Money's great, I get that, but um, man, boxes just don't they don't seem to complain near as much. So I think I can deal with that. So you've been in the flying side of aviation since you what 2015 is what you said?
Well, yeah, training I started in 2014. Like
14,
actual revenue flying, I started in 2018.
18. Okay. So revenue flying for roughly 7 years, been in aviation learning some way, shape, or form for about the last 11 years. If knowing what you know now, you meet yourself in 2014. Take that back. You meet yourself now. So somebody who's getting ready to do what you did, and they're like, what is a challenge in the industry that no one seems to say or that no one seems to think about before getting into aviation?
Okay. I got a couple of things actually. So, obviously, one of the biggest things is, finding a reliable institution that you can actually train from is one of the harder things. Like, I think a lot of people kind of just jump into it and don't do like the thorough research that's needed.
That was
Um,
me.
yeah, and so you definitely want to make sure that the school that you're going to is reliable. It has aircraft that are, if they break down, they have enough in the fleet that there's going to be a spare available for you, or at least that their maintenance is good enough to where it's not going to be down long enough. Or also the age of the fleet too, looking at that and seeing like how often they're going to be broke down compared to when how often they're going to be up and running.
Yeah.
Because again, you want consistency in aviation too. If you're like flying like like just once a week or like once every 2 weeks or something like that, it's not enough. You want like some consistency. I mean, I would say at the absolute bare minimum, you want to be flying like 2 times a week. And realistically, I would say the better number would be 3 times a week. It gives you just enough consistency throughout the week with a couple of breaks in between to also try to process what happened on the flight before, study and prepare for the next leg. Um, so things like that, I would say is one of the big things too, making sure you're doing the thorough research on the location. Um, you know, Another thing I would say, uh, networking is extremely important in this industry. If you're not somebody who's going to be social and get out there and like talk and go to these conventions or talk to people that are around doing jobs that you are interested in, because you're shy or bashful, whatever, you're going to miss out a lot of opportunities. That's one of the biggest downfalls I see with a
That's
lot of
me
people
again.
is they don't network or they don't they won't go to like these events and put themselves out there and there's a lot to say about meeting somebody face to face and giving them a chance to see who you are compared to like just being another resume in the pile and an application in the pile with no face.
Yep.
Uh, they're like, who the heck is this person? Like, just gonna be another random. But if you met them at a convention and you gave a very good impression, they're likely to say, hey, I remember this name. Like, oh yeah, Chris. Like, let me pull his thing up. Okay, okay. So he meets our requirements. That's good. Let's see if we can get him a phone call to to screen him for a possible interview. You
Yep.
know, heck, I mean, and then in some cases, if you're already set up and you're already through the process, you go to these conventions, you might be getting an interview on the spot. And again, so that's one big thing is networking and going to these conventions to look for these jobs. That's a huge deal too.
Well, so I got to ask then if you're or since you're a vet and you came from helicopters and all this other stuff, are you a part of RTAG at all?
I am.
You
Yeah.
are?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
I'm as of right now, I'm going in October, but I don't know what my schedule is going to be yet. So,
Okay. So I'm in RTAG only because it was suggested to me by somebody that was in class to do their scholarship programs and whatever. I don't have the stuff they need for the scholarship stuff. I'm glad it goes to the people that it goes to because they deserve it way more than I do. I don't have like the volunteer stuff and I'm not as active in aviation as I should be. I am ironically I am active passively because of the channel and because of the videos I've made and stuff like that. I've had people randomly come up to me and ask me if I am, the guy that does the videos for the 7.6. And so I'm engaged that way, but I'm not. I don't go to the conventions. I don't do all that stuff. Most of the time, it's not because I don't want to. It life, right? Wife, kids, all that kind of stuff. Stuff ends up coming up, and I can't make it. But for anybody watching, the 10 or so that are probably going to see this, um, RTAG, if you don't know what that is, it's a rotary to aviation group. I know it's kind of a misleading title to it now. They've changed a lot from when they first started. It started with a bunch of guys that were helicopter guys that became airline pilots, or rotary to airline. I think maybe is what it
Yeah.
was. Regardless, RTAG, RTAG, they are amazing people. I know a lot of people that are in the organization. I know guys that are on the committees that they were part of the founding things. These guys are amazing people. They're awesome. You don't necessarily have to be a vet to join anymore, correct? Like almost anybody can join. Is that kind of how that goes now?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, even though it was meant to like, help particularly Army rotorheads and well,
Right.
really just any rotorheads from the military transition over to the airlines, it's been open to all service members, enlisted, an officer, no matter what your career field was, and also civilians.
Yep.
I think the only difference is with military, like all the veterans are free, and then like anybody who's civilian that comes has to pay a fee to come into the thing. But it's out of all the conventions that you can go to, it's one of the cheapest ones. They
Yeah.
keep it very
And
cost
it's
efficient.
massive. It is
Yeah.
massive. The amount of job opportunities that come out of that from American, United, Delta, all of these big carriers, UPS, FedEx, everybody goes to this thing. So it is a massive, massive thing that those guys have been able to do, and it's awesome. You can look them up on Facebook. You can look out, just Google RTAG. You'll find them. They're a charity. They do a hell of a lot of charitable stuff. They do scholarships if you're interested in the flying, the like getting into flying and you don't have the money for it. They have scholarships. They have all kinds of stuff. I'm going to put a link in the description for their thing. Just, I have no association with them other than the fact I'm a part of the group, but they are absolutely incredible people that you can work with. Um, so with that being said, and going from there, so you got into aviation, like you said in the beginning of watching Top Gun and getting all of that kind of stuff. How different was it getting into aviation and being in the industry compared to what you thought it would be before you got in?
Oh, okay, yeah. Actually, the funny thing is, when I was watching Top Gun and all that stuff, I always wanted to be a fighter pilot,
Yeah,
and
well, of
so
course.
yeah, and so that's what I wanted to. That's what I was always focusing on, and so I was going the military route initially out of high school and all that stuff to be that. But then once I became a mechanic, and I actually started working like on fighter aircraft because that's what I maintain fighter airframes.
Yeah,
I actually got to see the mission set. I got to talk to a lot of the pilots. And then I realized, yeah, it's cool, but it's not exactly what I was really thinking it was, and it's not exactly what I was wanting out of it. So then I was like, okay, well, like, what are other opportunities in aviation? Because I still know I want to be a pilot. It's just what else is there out there? Because I
yeah,
was always so focused on being a freaking fighter pilot that I would never look outside the box of that. I mean, heck, I even got a scholarship for the Air Force for university to go and be to go officer route and be a pilot
yeah,
and stuff like that. So that was my focus. And then once I realized that that isn't actually what I wanted to do, so I was like, okay, well, what else is there? I was like, oh man, like helicopters, those are really cool. I really want to fly those. But then I started looking, I was like, okay, well, what is my ultimate goal in life? Do I want to have a family? Do I want to? Am I going to be like an eligible, aviation bachelor for the rest of my life? Like what am I going to do? And I was like, well, of course, I want to be a family man, stuff like that. So I want to start thinking like, okay, what's going to be a good thing to provide for my family, but also let me enjoy what I do.
yeah.
Um, So I started thinking, I was like, okay, well, maybe the airlines might be the right way for me or whatever, or going like, 121 world or something like that. So I started looking into everything and I started looking into things like, okay, well, there's cargo, there's passenger, and then there's, 135 and, 121 in that world. There's corporate flying, there's, medical flying. You can go be a firefighter if you want. There's so many different types of jobs out there. I was like, wow, man, I really didn't I really didn't put too much thought into this outside of I was really banking on the fighter pilot route, right?
Yeah.
You know? And so I started looking at all this stuff. I was like, man, well, what do I really want to do? And I was still like, even when I was in training, I was still trying to think like, what exactly do I want to do? I think cargo was always kind of the leading thing for me in my
Yeah.
brain. But I was like, I need to go see it and do it, and like then try some of these other things. And I was really fortunate because when I actually started getting into flying, it was right around when the hiring boom started. Like, I mean, well, first off, it was like right before COVID, where hiring was still picking up, it was getting way better. So I knew it was, I was going to have a lot of opportunities. But then COVID hit, and I was already in cargo at that time, so that was nice. I had that first job. I was experiencing that. I was loving it. But then as soon as COVID ended, boom, the boom hit. And I was like, all right, this is the time if I was ever to jump around and move to all these different jobs, it's now.
Yeah.
Because this won't be available to me later. So I took advantage of that and I went around. I went, from the airline, I went over to corporate, I went to, back over to cargo and all that stuff. And I looked at some other ones like medical. I was thinking about jumping over to medical too at the time. Um, but ultimately, I was like, you know what? I'm definitely focusing a lot more on this cargo side. And ultimately, for me, that's what won out. I was like, you know what? I do enjoy cargo operations a lot more than I do anything else.
Yeah.
And then I also thought to myself, like, as far as operations go, I do like the safety net that comes with 121 as well. Because at least on the 121 side, there is a lot more regulation for protection than if you go flying like on the 91 and 135 world. There's a little bit of looseness with regulations, and so like it can be a little bit more of a difficult area. And that's not to say that people operate like unsafe or not that, but like there is that potential, and so those are things that you got to consider. And for me, I just thought this sounds like one of the safer options, which is a big deal to me because I'm a big proponent of safety, but at the same time, it also provides everything that I need. It
Yeah.
provides the lifestyle that I want for my family. It provides the lifestyle I want for myself. It provides the type of flying that I enjoy doing, which is cargo and like that more relaxed atmosphere that I was talking about.
Yeah.
The one huge perk with ATI is the home basing that we have. There are
Oh
other
yeah.
companies out there that have it, but it's you're kind of seeing that as not a very common thing anymore. Only a few companies actually do it now, and that home basing for me is a big deal because that means I can be anywhere I want, and I don't have to worry about commuting like I did before. That was a huge perk.
Yeah.
Um, and a big difference maker too as far as making decisions. So yeah, when I was going through that process, that's exactly how I got to this location. And like I said, luckily for me, I came in when the industry was in dire need of pilots, and I had the ability to move around. I know a lot of people don't, from other generations never had that opportunity, so they had to just
Yeah.
know what they wanted to do, and if they got into it and didn't like it, well, tough luck. Either you leave
Yeah.
and just
I'm not
get out
moving
of the
because I
industry
don't want to
entirely.
lose my seniority.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or like, just because of how hard it was to get a job, like you were just thankful that you got something, So it was a very fortunate opportunity for me as a pilot to finally focus on what I wanted to do.
Yeah. So well, that same sentiment then of it being, we had the hiring boom, and it seems to have kind of leveled off, but I mean there's still a ton of opportunity out there for guys that if you want to
Yeah.
fly, you can. Um, what do you what do you see happening in the industry, or what do you think the industry is going to look like in the next 5 to 10 years? Obviously, nobody can be 100% sure, but you know, with whatever AI and Airbus doing their push for the single pilot thing that for now seems like it's kind of gotten smashed. what do you see down the line in aviation? Do you see it getting more difficult for pilots? Do you see it being easier?
Yeah, that is a pretty loaded question because
I know.
like I am by no means an expert on this. Like, people like Kit Darby and like Eric Sabiston and all those guys who like, who do like thorough research on this stuff and
Right.
like really, really know it. But I mean, if you're just going off of what just my base knowledge on everything and
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
I would think is the process or what the future is going to be. I mean, if you're looking at this AI thing, like or like the single pilot operations, I don't see that happening. Like, I mean, if it does, it's going to be well past my lifetime, is what I believe it to be. Just because,
That's my hope
again,
too.
yeah, it's just because it's been proven that it's just not as, safe and efficient, and there's not
Yep.
enough, you know, yeah, there's there's not a lot of like safety net there to truly go that route. And then you also got to think, public opinion matters. Like people are gonna care about the safety of their aircraft and their operations, and people don't feel safe flying, they're not gonna go fly, and that's gonna
Right.
be a huge hit to the industry. Um, I mean, people will always find a way to find other modes of transportation if they need to. Heck, I mean, people will start taking boats if they really have to,
Yep.
if they really are just that worried.
Well,
But at the end of the day, yeah,
no, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there, but ironically, you're talking about, public opinion matters. I mean, let's look at what happened at the beginning of this year.
yeah.
We had the accident in Dulles. We had the rollover in Canada. You had the Air India accident, and the fear mongering of flying that came around with that was incredible. Oh, and the Philly. I forget about the Philly one because that one just kind of disappeared. That one happened and was just gone. Nobody talked about it again. The Learjet or whatever it was that crashed.
Oh yeah,
The
yeah.
see, that was like that happened and it was done. Nobody heard anything else about it. And um, I think that kind of sparked off fear mongering amongst the internet anyway, with flying. And I try very hard to see all sides of it. And I get that people that don't fly, they're not in the industry, that they would be terrified to get on an airplane. They'd be like, "Nope, I'm gonna drive." And it's like, but it is safer like to fly. Like I know
Yeah.
it may not seem that way with what the media is telling you, but it is. It is. It absolutely is. But I also think that that's like you said, that's one of the things that's going to kill that single pilot legislation stuff, where it just doesn't make any sense to me that we'd get rid of an additional set of eyes in the flight deck. But unfortunately, given the track record of the FAA, the EASA or whatever, people leave their jobs, they retire, and the people that right now say no are going to get replaced eventually by people that maybe we can talk about it and then put in the
True.
regulation. I think a lot of it's actually going to, in my opinion, I think a lot of it is going to fall on the shoulders of the airlines to say no. We are going to require two people in the flight deck, and that's going to be in our contracts. That's going to be like, I think a lot of that's going to fall into the airlines. That's what I see happening in the next 5 or 10 years. Now, granted, I'm like you, I'm not an expert on it. I consider myself to know the 7.6 pretty well, but aviation in general, I leave that to actual experts. But
Mm,
I can at least say what I think might happen, and I think that's what it is. I think 5 to 10 years, we'll kind of see about the single pilot thing. I hope you're right. I hope it's not in my lifetime.
yeah.
Um, but I do see it eventually happening. I don't think the technology's there right now. I just don't,
And
regardless
that's
of what
exactly
airplane
what
we're
I
on.
think. That's exactly what I think. I think that's the big reason why. That's the big reason why I think the way I do is just because I don't think it's there yet. Because I mean, if it was, or if it was like knocking on the door, being pretty close, then like obviously it would be much more a real threat. Because obviously airlines would love to have that. Where like
Yeah.
they could cut
Oh, I
down
only have
on
to pay one guy?
yeah,
Okay.
exactly. And
Like,
then yeah, yeah, exactly. So I mean, it would. I mean, if that, if it was there, that would definitely, you know, fast track it to actually happen. But like I said, I don't think the technology's there yet. I don't think they have the answers yet to create enough, like I said, of a safety blanket there for to ease the minds of not only the operators but also the public.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and then it's interesting that you brought up the whole the news of like this year, like with the whole all the crashes that are happening,
Yep.
because right after that PSA crash, we actually had a family at the hotel that we were staying at, and the captain and I were just walking to our rooms, and they came up to us and said, "Hey, like we got a question for you guys." And it was about that
Ah,
crash, like how safe is it really to be up there and stuff like that when you hear things like this, and then it was just happened to be that week there was like three big crashes, though the PSA obviously like kind of really overshadowed most of them. But like there was like,
that definitely overshadowed a bunch because I mean the one that was in what Toronto, the rollover or whatever, nobody was severely injured. Like everybody survived it. So it was kind of like, oh, okay, yeah, that happened. Let's move on because it doesn't give us headlines.
yeah, exactly. But but we had a nice candid talk with them. The captain did most of the talking and stuff like that, and just kind of explained to them. Obviously it's still the safest mode of transportation. Things do happen, obviously, but like he talked through it and just said, look, you really have nothing to worry about. It's still like safer than like driving in your car because which would 100% true.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so especially in the age of cell phones. So
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, everybody's gonna have their opinion, and if you're one of the people that are watching this and you think that it's unsafe to fly, then fine. Um, I get it, but there's statistical data definitely doesn't back that up. It definitely shows that it is more safe to fly than it is to drive my car every day to work. Um, I I say to work. I work from home 99% of the time, so but you get the idea. Um, well, Chris, I want to end each one of these videos with a final question. What is one piece of wisdom that you would get or give? Sorry. What is one piece of wisdom that you would give to someone who is thinking about entering the aviation community?
I would say just take a good hard look at yourself and like ask yourself, do you really want to do this? I don't think this is just something that you can just jump into and like um, just make like a last minute whim decision. I mean, obviously you can do it like later in your life and stuff like that, but like, if you want this to actually be a career for you, then you're not just doing it for fun, then you really need to think to yourself, like, is this something I really want to do? Because, there's a huge commitment to it. You got to do a lot, there's a lot to the training that's involved. It costs a lot of money. The
Yep.
industry has a lot of ups and downs, and you have to be prepared for that. And some people like they like job security. You can have that in this job, but at the same time not.
To a point. Yeah.
Yeah, but you really never know until you're actually in it because unless you're high enough in seniority, um, you know, for the most part, you could be that next number that gets cut when it's time for furloughs or the economy goes and tanks or whatever. You just
Sometimes
never
it doesn't
know.
even matter what your seniority is. Sometimes you land somewhere. I mean, that's happened in Europe where the airplanes have landed and they're like, "Oh, by the way, we're not in operation anymore, so you got to find your way home." And it's like, "Oh, okay."
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like, most recently, like Air Wisconsin, I know I believe they're out of operations at this point. Spirit could possibly be there. I mean, they're definitely not doing well right now.
Yeah.
The big question is, can they make a comeback and get back to operations? Get their operations flowing again. There's a lot of, two-way opinions about that, well, whether they are or not going to make it. But again, those are things that you would have to deal with later down the road. So I definitely say like take a hard, good hard look at yourself and the situation, and really, like I said, do your thorough research, before jumping into this. If it's something that interests you and you really want to do it, just understand that there are risks associated with it. But if your love and passion for it are high, go for it. But if there's like doubt, then I would really probably sit down and reconsider, whether this is the direction that you want to go in life. That would be my advice, because I've seen so many people who looked at this from like just a very basic standpoint, like, oh, I just want to be a pilot. I'm like, okay, cool. Like you come in there, but you have like no thought. You have really like no knowledge about the industry. They didn't think too much into it. Didn't plan properly for it, and they'll come in like they'll use like their GI Bill or just their own cash and like run into like one hiccup or something like that, and then like all of a sudden the world's like crumbling, like the sky is falling for them, and like they've only hit their first roadblock, and so I'm like, okay, like there's going to be a lot more along the way, is this something that you really can handle? Um, and again, maybe you should, if you had the opportunity or if somebody was able to provide this information to you beforehand, what would you want to know? Again, I would want to know, like, really take the hard look and really, like I said, do the research. Take your time with the decision. Like, it's not something you just need to jump into. Really make sure it's something that you want to do. And then if it is, just understand the risk and go for it.
Cool. Well, I think it's an excellent way to end that out. Chris, I appreciate you being with me. I want to thank everybody that's watched until this point, that you've joined us here on GSI Guy. I really like doing these aviation conversation things. So every story that we go through, and I said it the last time, I'll say it again. Every story we go through makes a bigger and bigger, more diverse group of how people get into aviation and what they do. And if you enjoyed this, I'm going to be the freaking guy. Like, subscribe, share, smash the like button, whatever you got to do. Get it out to people who are interested in this kind of thing and want to learn more about the industry. Maybe they don't know anything about it. Maybe they can learn something from us. Um, but always hit the notification bell. That way you always get new videos from me. You can reach out to me, Brandon at gsiguy.com. You can reach out to me any other way there is. That's going to be down in the descriptions. And like I said, I'll put a link in there to our tag so you guys can check it out too. They're awesome, awesome people, and it's a great group to be a part of if you want to get into the aviation community. Outside of that, I will see you guys next time. Okay, so now I got to figure out where's my record to shut that off.